As the years crept by, Daniel noticed the changes. At 65, he was still strong, his mind sharp, but there were subtle hints that his body was less forgiving than before. A night of rich food and wine now lingered in his stomach, like a stubborn guest refusing to leave. A late bedtime seemed to cost him 2 full days of energy. And most of all, the way his heart pounded after a particularly tense conversation with his son concerned him in a way it never had before. It was during a routine checkup that his doctor, Dr. Alvarez, leaned forward with a certain seriousness in her voice. Daniel, there's one thing I want you to cut back on. More than sugar, more than alcohol, more than salt. Daniel waited for the lecture on cholesterol or carbohydrates, but Dr. Alvarez's eyes locked on his. Stress. He let out a short laugh. Stress? I thought that was just part of life. It is, she said, but as you age, your body's resilience to it changes. When you were younger, stress hormones like cortisol spiked and then fell quickly. Now, they linger longer, causing more wear and tear on your heart, your brain, and your immune system. If you want a healthier, longer life, you need to treat stress like a dangerous toxin and limit your exposure. At first, Daniel dismissed it. Stress was unavoidable. He had bills, adult children with problems of their own, and a community volunteer role he couldn't abandon. But later that week, he sat in his quiet kitchen after a phone call with his daughter, who was struggling in her marriage. His heart thudded in his chest, not from anger, but from a deep, restless worry. He remembered Dr. Alvarez's words. The trouble with stress was that it didn't always feel like a threat. Sometimes it disguised itself as productivity, as love, as responsibility. It whispered, "You're handling this well," even as it quietly eroded the body from within. Daniel decided to conduct an experiment, not to eliminate stress entirely. He knew that was impossible, but to cut it back wherever he could. He started small. First, the news. Every morning he would brew his coffee, open his tablet, and scroll through headlines filled with war, political arguments, and economic predictions of doom. He told himself it was important to stay informed, but in truth, much of it made him tense and powerless. So one morning, he didn't open the news. He took his coffee outside, sat under the maple tree in his yard, and just listened to the birds. His mind protested at first, trying to pull him toward the important things happening in the world, but within minutes he felt lighter. Then he tackled his social calendar. Daniel had always been a yes person, agreeing to every favor, every community event, every meeting. He told himself he was being helpful, but deep down, the constant rushing left him exhausted. So he began saying no. At first, it felt uncomfortable, even selfish. But then he realized something. The world didn't collapse without his presence. In fact, some things went on just fine without him. He also began practicing something his wife, Claire, had tried to get him into for years: slow breathing. It seemed too simple to matter, just inhaling and exhaling slowly for a few minutes a day, but the effect was immediate. His heart rate dropped, his mind cleared, and he found himself able to think more calmly about challenges instead of reacting with a jolt of adrenaline. But the biggest change came when Daniel started noticing the small daily irritations that used to spark silent frustration. The driver who cut him off, the neighbor's dog barking, the long line at the grocery store. Each one had been a tiny tax on his body. Now, whenever he felt that familiar surge of annoyance, he would remind himself, this isn't worth the cost. Sometimes he imagined each irritation as a hand reaching for his wallet of health and years left to live, and he decided not to pay. 3 months into his experiment, Daniel went for a walk with his old friend Henry, who was a year younger but already battling high blood pressure and early heart disease. "You seem different," Henry remarked. "You've got that calm look, like a monk or something." Daniel chuckled. "Not a monk, just someone who realized stress is the one thing I can't afford to binge on anymore." Henry frowned. "I can't just decide not to be stressed." "Neither can I," Daniel admitted, "but I can choose how much I feed it. It's like cutting back on sugar. You still get some without realizing it, but you don't keep adding spoonfuls to everything." Over the next year, Daniel noticed profound differences. His sleep improved. He no longer woke at 3 a.m., replaying conversations in his head. His digestion was steadier, his energy more consistent. And perhaps most surprising, he found himself laughing more. It was as if he'd made space in his mind for joy to enter, space that used to be occupied by constant tension. The changes also rippled into his relationships. He no longer jumped into every problem his children brought to him, offering immediate fixes. Instead, he listened more, and in doing so, he realized they often didn't want solutions, just understanding. His friendships deepened too, because he was more present, less distracted by a mental to-do list. One autumn afternoon, as leaves fell in bright swirls across his lawn, Daniel thought about the years ahead. He knew aging would bring its challenges: slower steps, perhaps more doctor visits, a gradual narrowing of what he could do. But he also knew he had gained something precious: an ability to protect the most limited resource he had left: time in good health. Cutting back on stress hadn't just eased his days, it had extended the quality of his life. And that, he realized, was what Dr. Alvarez had meant. It wasn't about avoiding every difficulty or pretending life was perfect. It was about refusing to let unnecessary burdens shorten the years he had left to enjoy. On his next visit, Dr. Alvarez listened to his updates with a satisfied smile. "You've done exactly what I hoped, Daniel. Your blood pressure is down, your heart rate variability is better, and most importantly, you look like a man who's savoring life instead of bracing against it." Daniel grinned. "Turns out stress tastes worse than I thought. I've lost my appetite for it." "Good," she said, "because while sugar and salt can harm you over decades, stress can cut those decades short. Keep cutting it back, and you'll be giving yourself the greatest gift aging allows: a longer, better tomorrow." When Daniel left the clinic, the city traffic was heavier than usual. Drivers honked, pedestrians rushed, the air seemed thick with impatience. A younger version of him might have joined the chorus of frustration. But now, he just turned on the radio, found a song he liked, and let the car in front of him merge without a second thought. Somewhere inside, he felt the quiet strength of a man who had learned that life's length and its quality often hinge on what we choose not to carry. And he was determined to keep traveling light.